welcome to another A-Level Computer Science video with me, Mr Goff, for MrGoff.com. This video will go through using a class and the objects you can create with it in a larger program. In this video, we're going to use the animal class created in the last video in a basic procedural program. This will use an array to store animal objects and let us add, remove and view animals in the array. If we refresh ourselves with the animal class, we're going to have attributes for name, type, breed and age. We're going to have getters and setters for each of our attributes, and we've made a string method to easily output all the details for a particular object. The main program works with an array that stores the animal objects that we create. It then has a menu structure from which we call the three subroutines that we're going to create. These are add an animal, view all animals, and remove an animal. To write the add an animal subroutine, we need to pass the animals array as a parameter and return it as it will have an additional object in it. We get the required input information from the user and create and store an instance of an animal object. We then append this to the animals array and then return that back to the main program. A small but important note to make is that where I've used this animal as the local variable name in order to store our instance of an animal, you couldn't use animal for this purpose because it would get confused with our class name animal. The view all animals subroutine is made easier because of the string method we implemented. We can simply loop through the array printing the object, and its string method will be called in each case. I've used a for I in range loop so I could number the animals as it's useful for the next task. To create the remove an animal subroutine, first I display the list of animals with their number to the user by calling the view animals subroutine we just created. Then I get an input of which number animal they'd like to remove. An animals.pop choice returns the object that's in the right location in the array, so by calling getName on this particular instance, I can then return just the name from that object instead of returning its string method. You can see from the sample outputs here that when I run the program, I can now add animals, view all of the animals in a numbered list, and choose one of them to remove. The idea now is that you try to create your own class and a program to work with it. Create a new program with a class for cars. Each car should store data about its registration, make, model, and price. Create the appropriate getters and setters. In fact, in this case, as the registration, make, and model won't change, you only need a setter for price. Test your class by creating some objects and calling their getters and setters to display some data. Pause this video now because on the next slide I'm going to go through the solution for you, and it's best if you try it yourself before you see the answer. Here we can see the cars class. It starts with the constructor where we pass self and all the values that we need to apply to self's attributes. That's self.registration, self.make, self.model and self.price. Then we have our getters. We have a getter for get registration, get make, get model, and get price. Then we have our set price method that allows us to apply a new price. Below this, you can see that I've instantiated two cars. So car 1 has its own values and car 2 has its own values. To demonstrate that the model is working, I've printed the details of car 1, as you can see. Then I've called set price on it so that it would change its price and printed the details again to show that that price change has been applied. Next up, create a method to add a car object to an array. To test it, create an empty array and pass it to the subroutine and back and print it before and after adding a vehicle. This will show you whether or not there's an object in there. Pause this video now so that you can have an attempt at it, and then I'll show you the solution on the next slide. This is the add car subroutine that takes the cars array as a parameter. We have to start by asking the user to input all the values for the attributes of this instance of a car that we're going to create. We can then append this new instance with all the values that they've provided to us. Then we return the cars array with the new extra car in it back to the main program. You can see that where I call it and pass it an empty array and add a car, then I enter the details for it and print cars, you can see that there is now a car object in my array. Next, you should create a method to list the cars in the array. If you haven't already done so, make a string method to print out the vehicle details neatly. To test it, use the add car method to add several cars and then call the view cars method. Pause this video now, and on the next slide I'll go through the solution to this. My string method returns an F string with the registration, make, model and price. I've chosen to left align the make and model and give each of them 10 characters width so that it comes out looking more tabular. I also put a pound sign before the price. You can see that the list cars method itself simply loops through the cars array and prints out each of the cars which calls its string method. I've used I+1 simply because people wouldn't expect the cars to be numbered off starting at 0. Next, create a method to remove a car. List the cars using the list cars method you just created and get the user to choose which one to remove. Remove the correct car, then test it by listing the cars again after removing one. Pause this video now, and in a moment I'll go through the answers. This is the remove car subroutine that takes the cars array as a parameter. First, we call the list cars subroutine that we just created. We then get a choice off the user that takes account of the fact that each car in the array will be in a position one less than the number that it displays here. We then print a message to say which car was removed, and using pop means that the item is also removed from the array. We then return the cars array back to the main program with one less car in it. You can see that when we call list cars after we've called the remove car method, that we no longer have the Datsun as one of our cars. Finally, it's time for you to create a menu to call the subroutines from. Test it by adding a few cars, removing a car, and listing the cars to see if it was removed. Pause this video now while you create your own answer, and then I'll take you through the solution. This is the main program and menu system. We start with a cars array into which our objects will be placed. We then have a while loop with our menu that allows us to call the add car, list cars and remove car methods that we've created. The important thing to note is that both add car and remove car are functions, meaning they return a value. So we have to say it's the cars array is equal to add car cars, and the cars array is equal to remove car cars, so that we can have the values passed back when we've either added a new car object or removed one of our car objects. List cars, on the other hand, is a procedure, so only needs to be called with the name list cars and pass the cars array. That brings us to the end of this video on using a class to create objects that you use in a regular program. Join me in the next video when I'll be looking at the idea of inheritance in object-oriented programming. Use the resources at mrgoff.com to help you revise computer science. And until next time, it's bye for now.